You have an agent. Yay! You have a book out on submission to editors. Awesome. And you have a lot of time to think about what is or isn't happening with your manuscript. Now, the best advice out there to survive being on submission is to write your next book. Channel your energy into the next project. What's that going to be? So, my agent wanted me to work in a way that I hadn't done before and from an outline. It made sense. After doing rounds of edits on book one and then we queried it, for book two, we wanted to be on the same page about the plot points before I wrote it, so it was less rewriting for me and less rereading for them. So, can a pantser or discovery writer become a plotter? Stay tuned. Hi, I'm MK Williams. I'm an author and I also write under the pen names Mary Kate Williams and Kate Williams. I love sharing my insights about all things books and publishing with you. Before I get into the details of today's topic, don't forget to hit subscribe. You'll be notified every week as I put out new videos on publishing, making career of being an author, and now being a mompreneur. So I'm going to do a separate video all about the pitch I sent for this book and how it evolved from a loose concept to a finished, polished book description. But I'm going to go over the timeline with you of once we knew what the book would be to writing it. So for book one, which is Heifer, that I wrote it all before querying, okay? And the very first seed of that book hit me in late 2020. I was writing it, and by the end of 2022, it was done. I queried it in early 2023. So that book process was very long. And that's typically what my process was to that point. I have an idea, I kind of work through it, discover it as I'm writing it. Oh no, this is actually the story, completely rewrite it. It takes a long time. But I was happy with that creative process. So the process for book number two um, has been lightning speed faster compared. So let's go over the timeline. So I pitched my ideas to my agent on April 17th, 2024. Um, they wrote back pretty quickly to say which one they liked, and then we hopped on a call to brainstorm further on May 7th. My pitch to her was very loose. When I sent the email of like 3 pitches, I had like the most formal pitch, almost like a query letter for the first book idea that I had, and I even put like asterisks like, "I'm the most excited about this one." And then I put idea number 2 and idea number 3, and idea number 3 was like so loose, just like, "Hey, I've always had this idea in my head. It'd be a totally different genre, but here's what, it would be." And that was the one I left. So we had a call on May 7th to kind of brainstorm it out, where I thought it would go, what we wanted to make sure was included or not included. So my agent and the agency as a whole is much more editorial. So some agents will not have this process. They'll say, "Okay, I like that pitch, write it," and they'll work on it later. Or they'll be like, "We expect you to do all the developmental, constructive work, and we're not going to touch it. And if we like it, we'll put on submission. If we don't, we won't." So I am glad that my agent wanted to be involved from the beginning, so I didn't run down the wrong rabbit hole. Um, some agents are like that, some aren't. That should be part of the discussion if you are having that call with an agent of how do you like to work together? How would our book 2 process be, okay? So we had the call on May 7th. By May 22nd, I had the outline, draft 1, done and sent over. This was tough for me because it was the first time I was like, I'm gonna outline the whole story and everything that's gonna happen from the get-go. So that was very different from my usual process. So with the outline, I included kind of the general beats almost as chapter by chapter. Um, and I included a list of like character names, company names, things like that. I had some sketches for what I thought the book description could be and some title options. And it was really great to have all that in there because my agent called out that there were 3 names that were practically the same. So nip that one in the bud. So I got outline feedback on May 24th. So 2 days just to review the outline. So that was awesome. So I revised the outline and I submitted the first 3 chapters on June 3rd. So that way they had that. I got feedback on the revised outline and the first 3 chapters on June 27th, but I do want to put an asterisk on that my agent was on vacation for 2 weeks in June. So it looks like it took longer, but I knew it was going to take a while. So at this point, we're locked in on the outline, roughly, okay? We know what we want to do. And so I revised the chapters and got those back by July 8th. So then, okay, the first 3 chapters come back. So it was at this point, roughly the first It was more than the first 3 chapters. It was like the first 25% of the book. I got that back with light edits on July 9th. So I sent it July 8th. I got them back July 9th again because we were already agreed on what was going to be happening. There wasn't a, maybe we should do this instead, or why don't you talk about this here? Because they knew, oh, it's coming later, like it's building to this. So I got those edits back and the green light to write the first 50% on July 9th. It was very exciting. So I sent everything back to her with the first 50% written on July 29th. Now I wrote about that 25% next in a week. I took 3 days to revise, 25% in a week, 7 days to revise again. So because this was the first pass with like that full like 50%. I was expecting a lot of edits, but again, we're already agreed on things. Now, I do want to say every single time I got edits back, I listened and I read the whole thing. So I reread the whole thing. And then I like to use the Microsoft Word read aloud function to read the book to me because then I can tell, hey, that's a really repetitive word. Oops, that was the wrong word there. Or like they didn't, this sounds weird. Oh, like there isn't a comma where there should be. Like it's very helpful to me. So every time I get it back, I'm reading the whole thing multiple times. So I am memorizing this book piece by piece. Now I sent that to her on July 29th. July 31st, I got the edits back. 2 days, 2 days. So that was so fast. And I think some of it was that, again, we defined it before. So I think this is me slowly becoming a plotter because, wow, wow, this was so much faster to do. And I really appreciated those time savings. Now, I do think this worked out specifically because this book is a romance. And so I think that genre is better suited to outlines because there are certain beats you have to hit and certain time frames that you really want to hit those in to be able to get everything in and really build that. Now, I completed the edits for the first 50% by August 6th. I took a week to work through those. And again, each time I'm rereading the whole thing. So on August 14th, so a couple days, about a week later, I got the all clear. Yes, this is good to go. Write the whole thing. So I finished draft one, where I finished writing on August 25th. And then I worked until September 4th to just revise it before sending it back. So that was September 4th is when my agent finally had the first full manuscript. Now I got the full draft review, whole book review back on September 26th. This is a very critical date for my life story, September 26, 2024, because I received this email literally hours before Hurricane Helene cut our power and totaled our cars. So this was, we knew the hurricane was coming. I knew I was expecting this email. And when Isabel sent the email, she said, hey, do you want to talk through some of these? And I said, yes. Anytime there's an opportunity for me to talk with my agent about edits, I'm always going to say yes, because I think it's so much easier than like trying to guess or lots of emails back and forth. And then I usually have questions on other things I want to ask anyways. So we were good with that, but I knew the storm was coming. We had to like do certain things to prepare. And so that night the power went out. The storm that was 100 miles offshore flooded the parking lot of our condo and the parking lot of the condo across the street from us and every single home in our community. So it was an interesting time to live through. And so on October 1st, we were chatting about the edits and talking about, okay, we want to go on sub around the 2025 London Book Fair. So I had a timeline for what we needed to get done and when those next 2 or 3 rounds of edits needed to hit so we can make that. Then Hurricane Milton hit and jacked up our shit. So we evacuated. I'm working on edits when I can, finding out from a neighbor, nope, your place flooded, but we're on the 6th floor. Yep, the winds were a sustained 140-mile-per-hour winds, pouring water in through your window sills and your patio door. Your place is flooded. Yeah. So it was crazy. And then getting home, and we had to pack up our home in hours because the remediation team hired by our condo HOA was ready to start cutting the drywall. And did you know that drywall dust is nearly impossible to clean once it is on your stuff? So all credit to Isabel. She was so good at like focus on life. Like if we're a little late going on sub, like that is fine. Please focus on what needs to get done right now, like finding a new home or moving somewhere where there's walls. And that was obviously more important than the book. That's absolutely true. But I do think having the book to work on kept me sane in all the chaos. It was like my life raft. So thank you. Thank you, book, for doing that. So I sent the edits on draft one back to my agent on October 26th. And again, a lot of these were more line edits versus like structural. We need to change those plot point edits. So that made it a bit faster. Now, I didn't get edits back from her for final content tweaks till December 2nd. And we chatted about those edits on December 13th. And some of that was because even though my agent is based in the UK, she is from the US. So she was celebrating Thanksgiving and other holidays that kind of come between October 26th and December 2nd as well. So that was good. So we talked about the edits. Now, I sent the next draft back to her on January 3rd. I knew they were going to be closed for a couple more days for the new year, but I wanted to be like higher priority in the inbox. So I was happy to send that off. They got edits back to me saying, okay, final copy edits on January 22nd, going on sub soon. We did a lot of tuning the opening chapters, like a lot. Like I would say the majority of the edits I got in January were just, let's change this about the first two chapters. Let's change this about the first three chapters. What about this and this and this? And so it was a lot of really fine tuning those first chapters, but they're really important. So I sent edits back to her January 24th. I got final tweaks on February 3rd. And I was able to turn them around same day. And my agent said, great. Finally getting the message. Sit tight. We're going on sub next week, which was like, okay, it's happening. It was so fast to get the book done. And so on February 13th, 2025, I got the confirmation email. We are on sub. Pop the champagne, drink the writer's tears whiskey. It's time. So it was 10 months from pitch to being on submission. And I think that's not too shabby. I don't know if other authors work a lot faster. But that was how it worked for us. You know, when I was working on Heifer, it would take 4 to 6 weeks to hear back on each iteration because it was the whole book and it had already been written. So when we went to pull one thread, we had to know what was changed and what wasn't throughout the book and how that was all going to interact. And then, you know, I would take 4 to 6 weeks to work on my edits to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So the final tweak revisions were really quick, but they were still like 2 week increments because it just takes a long time when it's the whole book versus when we've already agreed on it and now we're just jumping in. So for most of the first draft of this book, which I'm going to wait till the end to tell you, I was really working with Isabel. So was the junior agent at the agency. And so she worked as like a second reader on Heifer through all the edits with Kristina. And so when I signed with Kristina, I knew that she was the principal agent. She's the boss, but Isabel has been just as involved with Heifer. As Kristina was. And then when it came time for this book, because it's a romance and Isabel's working on building her romance and romantasy titles, it just made sense for us to work together on this book. So Kristina could focus on the other genres that she like was focused on. So I loved it. I felt like I had two agents the whole time with my best interest at heart. So this was awesome. Now, obviously, in between drafts of the book, I would catch up on my mom work. I would research VPKs, homeschooling, scheduling autos for the kiddo, just like life. I also submitted some short stories to literary magazines, try to get my local library to get my books into the book clubs, like all the authory things I was doing. Technically, when I wrote Architects in 2019 NaNoWriMo, that was the fastest I wrote a book, but I had at least 30,000 words to start when I began NaNoWriMo that November, because I had a document with like years of like tinkering and building and ideas. So I'd say it took me 2 years to get it done in 1 month. But for this book to be done in 10 months, like truly like not just first draft done. I mean, that was between April and August. So that was only 4 months. But to say, okay, between first idea to it's on submission being 10 months, that this was the fastest I've ever written a book. So that was exciting. So now we have a manuscript and it's on submission. And the first rule of being on submission is that you don't talk about being on submission, which tells you everything you need to know that I am in fact no longer on submission. Stay tuned.